Okay. Hello. For those of you who know me, I am Heywood. This is Heywood and Stuff. This is the channel, for those of you that don't know me, where I predominantly talk about mental health. I talk about relationship stuff with my partner. I've got a couple of podcasts, have a look around. Today, I'm going to be talking about something which has been a bit of a milestone in my recovery, my mental health, and in my growth, essentially. Now, there's a lot of ADHDers watching this, and I don't want you to get too bored, so feel free to skip ahead in the timestamp below to anything that might kind of tickle your pickle, something that is more relevant to what you're looking for in regards to what rumination is, but I am going to explain a few things before I get into it. Who is this video for? You may be asking yourself this question quickly before you continue down the track of this 10 to 15 minute video. Well, it is essentially for anyone who may find themselves getting stuck in negative spiraling thoughts, anyone who's got a possible habit of thinking and analyzing and frying their fucking brain over one particular scenario, whether it's in the past or whether it's in the future, something, you know, where your brain is kind of getting stuck on the same thought and repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. Within the mental health space, especially on social media, we see a lot of people talking about anxiety and we see a lot of people talking about depression. And to be honest, you can find everything now. What fascinates me is that although anxiety and depression are so at the forefront of people's attentions, which I think is super important, we often skip a couple of the steps before that. Some of the main contributing factors to what is causing depression and anxiety. I am gonna quickly just caveat this by saying I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist. I have had a lifelong challenge with mental health. It's ongoing. I am a lot better than I used to be. So all this is just stuff that I have kind of explored and discovered on my own with the help of other professionals. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of self-diagnose whether or not you may or may not have rumination. This is a good one to just begin that step of awareness of like, oh shit, maybe I do struggle from this external issue called rumination. This isn't necessarily me and how I am. This is an additional issue which I don't have to live with. You may have had a certain rumination issue for 20 years, and so it kind of gets really locked into your identity, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to always be that way. These are coping strategies that we've picked up along the way, and you know, the first step is awareness to be able to kind of alleviate the fucking symptoms. It's a minefield, I tell you. So, do you have rumination? Do you do this? Do you have the illusion that by thinking deeply about something, you can resolve the issue that you're thinking about? Does that make sense? I do this all the time. If I've got an issue in my head, it's usually stems from an insecurity. I think about it again and again and again, and it's like on some subconscious level, I feel like if I think about it hard enough, if I think about it deep enough, I'll be able to resolve the issue. Maddening. This can even stem from things in the past where you'll be thinking about how you could have changed, how you could have done something differently. We've all been there, failed relationships, looking back and going, oh, if I just, you go potty doing that. Do you have a cognitive bias? So this means like catastrophizing everything, always looking at the negative, always seeing the worst outcome of any given scenario. Now, some people would argue that this is a strength, because if you can prepare for the worst, then it can only result in a better outcome. But the truth is, if you're always catastrophizing and looking at the worst possible outcome, it really takes a toll on your nervous system. You're constantly in that state of well, not only fear, but worry, and it's not a healthy place to live in, if you like. So, if you find yourself feeling anxious or overwhelmed after having a bout of deep thinking over the certain situation at hand, more than likely you've been ruminating. We don't have to feel anxious after thinking about stuff. If you find that you're struggling to focus on your day-to-day activities, if you're struggling to be present in the now because you're looking back or because you're looking forward, that is a sign of rumination. Some people get confused with anxiety, thinking, oh, I'm anxious, but actually it's the rumination behind the anxiety. The initial steps of rumination is what's caused that anxiety. A sense of paralysis, when you are deep in thoughts over something and you have been really feeding that little bitch inside your brain, that negative thought process, and you are paralyzed with either fear or just, task paralysis. A lot of ADHDers will be able to resonate with this. We often struggle going from task to task as it is. Paralysis is a real thing. I always call it that invisible wall that just doesn't allow you to move forwards. And rumination can often be a key element of this. And of course, the real fucker of all of this is that if you've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, it does become your default mechanism. So you only need that one thought to pop into your head, which may be self-critical or negative or fearful, and boom, you start the rumination process, and then you gradually spiral, or just kind of like, you ruminate, don't you? You're just kind of like in a hot tub of thought, which isn't helping you progress in an efficient, healthy manner. Some people can be super, super efficient ruminating. It's just not. Let me put it this way. If you're really high functioning and really efficient and really productive and ruminate, it's not because of the rumination. You remove the rumination and you'll still be all those things. I promise you. The rumination is like, it's not a superpower. There's nothing good about it. If you have the ability to ruminate for hours on end, you've also got the ability to be self-critical in a positive way. You'd be able to analyze and overlook situations in a positive, healthy way, rather. And the rumination process is disregarded. You don't need it to get the outcomes that you desire. From what I've learned, there are two types of rumination. There's brooding rumination and there's reflective rumination. Now, I'm looking into the two different types of rumination, but they seem to overlap a lot. One essentially is where you kind of dwell a lot on the causes and the reasons why something happens. It's often self-critical, self-blame and all of that. And the reflective rumination is often trying to find solutions and understand consequences of a certain action that you may be about to take, both of which you end up looping and going into excessively. A fundamental issue with rumination is the excessiveness of the thought pattern. There's nothing wrong with thinking about these things. It's when it becomes obsessive and it kind of deteriorates the mental health ecosystem around it, right? There are many ways in which somebody can begin to ruminate. But we're not going to go into that here because I want this video really to be more about becoming aware of potential rumination and ways in which you can kind of alleviate it and just start working on it. As a ruminating brain, it's very easy to kind of obsess over the whys, and sometimes what we need is the hows. I've definitely been ruminating for as long as I can remember, since a child, and I think, growing up as a teenager, it's difficult. I definitely ruminated over all aspects in my life, and this very quickly developed into social anxiety. My social anxiety became so bad in my 20s that, sometimes I wouldn't leave the house. Sometimes I'd be on my way to somewhere like uni and then I'd just turn back. And I didn't even realize that it was anxiety that was doing it until I was in my 30s and I looked back and I was like, oh my God, I'm really socially anxious. So then in my 30s, my mental health was getting much better because I was understanding my social anxiety. I was understanding my depressive bouts, and I understood how to take care of a lot of that. But one thing that kept coming back to me was if anything kind of even mildly traumatic would happen. So it could be an argument with a friend, or, you know, losing a job, or, you know, a child getting sick. Okay, so these are, some would say mildly traumatic, some people call it super traumatic. Given the perspective, none of it is heavily traumatic. But in the ruminating brain, it can become super traumatic because something will happen like that, and my brain will latch onto it and go into overdrive, start, you know, thinking worst case scenarios, trying to make sense of it. I think it all stems from trying to create a safe place for myself to live in. And so anything that becomes a little unstable, it becomes this huge ordeal. That's one step. But then to not get answers or to not fully understand something, which is often the case with life, can become so such an unstable place to live that you ruminate on it and you're constantly trying to find answers to something that might not actually have answers, and for sure might not need answers for you to progress and to move forward and to continue with your life, right? It's difficult, but I realized at some point this year in 2024 that my mental health issues all stem to a degree because everything it can go deeper and further back in history, but the point in which I need to look is the ruminating, because it's the ruminating where I get stuck on a particular problem, and that is what kind of creates the issues in my head. I'm going to do another video about the ruminating hypervigilance connection. So hypervigilance is when, if you don't know, where you are super aware of anything that could go wrong. It's that awareness and fear connected of something that could go bad. So, you know, hypochondriacs are hypervigilant. If someone who will eat their food until it's a complete liquid in the swallow because of the fear of choking, hypervigilant. Or, you know, if you have PTSD, you're hypervigilant, you're in a state of hypervigilance. The hypervigilance itself justifies the rumination. And so you end up in a really toxic relationship with your hypervigilance and rumination, where they both seem justified, which is terrifying, but it's for another video. I am not here to fucking preach. I am here to share my story, and so I will. And if this is poignant for you, or if it hits home, I am both sorry and you're welcome, right? And it's up to you to take it on the chin, to throw it away, or to just process it in whatever way makes sense to you. Again, this is my experience. Doesn't necessarily mean it's for everyone. I've done a little bit of research on this and it seems to be a thing. So, a lot of people that struggle with rumination, they will often turn to drink, drugs, gambling, any dopamine hitting activity which is going to, you know, raise your dopamine and help you remove yourself from the painful reality that rumination causes internally. So, when I was 14, I started drinking, and I suppressed a lot of stuff right up into my 30s. It was only in my 30s when I went sober for 4 years. I now drink again, but very regularly, very infrequently. But that's a separate story. My point is that the alcohol itself, I was suppressing a lot of the ruminating thoughts, or at least trying to face the full feelings of ruminating thoughts, because the reality is a lot of us, when we're drunk, we ruminate a lot anyway, but you don't feel it as much, I guess. The problem with these dopamine hitting activities, even gambling, is that it takes us away from being present in our own bodies. It takes us away from really feeling the rumination. The reason why we want to feel the rumination is often so that we can understand that it's there and that it's a thing, and that alone can help alleviate it. Because there are ways to catch rumination in progress simply by being aware of it, and I'll go into more tricks, I guess, to try and take you out of a rumination loop. It's harder to be self-aware when you're changing your state of consciousness, basically. That's just the way it is. And I mean, that's why so many of us, when we've had traumatic shit happen, we turn to drinking drugs. It's because we don't want to feel the wrath of trauma, I guess. And it's the same with rumination. What I would say is, once you quit or slow down all of these dopamine hitting things, you start regulating your dopamine, and you slowly gain the tools to be able to look at the rumination, the cause of a lot of the problem, and remove it to an extent where you no longer feel the need to drink, take drugs, gamble. Again, I'm saying this from my perspective. I know this is some triggering shit for people. Yeah, I was doing a bit of research on this, and one sentence that I really liked from it was, high dopamine behaviors rewards impulsivity and discourages delayed gratification, which causes avoidance and reactive behavior, making it much harder to engage introspection and break the loop. Avoidance means nothing can be addressed. Right? Now, obviously, it's difficult because it's not, if you're someone that ruminates, there's a lot of things that can trigger rumination, not only like traumatic events or mildly traumatic events, but stress alone can heighten the rumination cycle. Rumination strives on stress. Stress heightens the feelings and thoughts that the individual is trying to escape, right? And so if you've got a stressful day at work, the rumination is going to go up. And so you're more likely to turn to drinking to bring it all back down. And so the cycle continues. Obviously, after years of doing that, those rumination thoughts, they're not leaving you. They're still there. They're still waiting to be addressed, essentially. And so people go 10, 20, 30, 40 years never really addressing the original issues that they're escaping from anyway. But because it becomes such a habitual part of life, you're not even aware that you're doing it. And this isn't just for people that drink daily or for people that take drugs or do any kind of risky behaviors, or dopamine hitting behaviors. You can be teetotal and have a very healthy life and active, and your brain still defaults to rumination. All I'm saying is that all of that doesn't help, and it can increase the problem, even though it momentarily feels like it's resolving it. So what the fuck can we do to help? Well, you've heard it all before. It's always the same stuff, right? It's healthy living, and this is, it's just a constant fucking battle, because you got to be so squeaky clean to be able to have a really healthy internal ecosystem. So what is it? It means don't drink. It means don't do drugs, kids. It means practice mindfulness, meditation and yoga. I do need that. I have done both. They both helped. Why don't I do it anymore? I don't know. Maybe I should think about it, but not too much. It's a fucking minefield. I think the main thing is the awareness for me, is just to be aware of when it happens and to check in with myself. If something feels off, I'll be like, oh, is this because I'm just stuck on that thought and I'm not moving forward? And it's very easy to get trapped into old thinking patterns. Also, there's sometimes a codependence with a partner who may also have rumination issues, where you co-ruminate together. And so it's very easy to fall into that pattern of both of you doing it. It doesn't help either of you, even though if in that moment it feels like, it feels good in the moment because you're not alone, because there's a bit of a dopamine kick, but it's ultimately not going to do you any good, right? I'm not going to patronize anyone and say, you've got to exercise and shit like that. We all know that. I think it's sometimes underrated how difficult it is for people that struggle with mental health to get into exercise. Here's another little tip, remedy thing that you can do if you are sometimes ruminating on stuff, and that is simply to give yourself some rumination time. So if you've, it sounds ridiculous, right? But if you've got something that you want to kind of just deep dive into, you know, you want to ruminate whole that little bastard, give yourself some thinking time. So literally set yourself an alarm for 10 minutes and be like, right, I am going to think about this for 10 minutes. And then think about it for 10 minutes and allow yourself to go through it, allow yourself to feel it, allow yourself to look at it in the face. And then after 10 minutes, when the alarm goes off, do something else. Do something that calms you, that makes you feel good. Go for a fucking walk. And that will kind of help you get out of that constant madness of thinking about the same fucking thing. I hope this video has been of some benefit to you. I hope I've gone over everything that I wanted to. I apologize if it seems like I've just shouted at you. I love you so much. I think it's really important, this rumination stuff. If we're gonna spend so much fucking time talking about anxiety and depression, we might as well talk about the bitch that started it. I'm gonna do another video soon about ADHD medication and how I've been rewiring my brain through neuroplasticity. It sounds like sci-fi, but it's true. I'm gonna go. I think this is probably long enough. Thank you for watching, and, you know, take care. Be good. God bless. Peace! Bye. I need to get back on my meds, man.